It's officially free agency day. It's here. Here's everything you need to know about the Pacers free agency period, the signings they can do financially, what things could signal, how renegotiations plan, under the radar guys to watch. You'll get all of it today with Rhett Bauer on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, this episode's coming out early because it's free agency day, 6 p.m. on Friday. Stuff can officially get rolling. We're going to preview it all today. Why the Pacers are a unique situation team with their roster and cap situation, what that means they could do from a signings and trades perspective, positions to look out for, under the radar names to watch, and more. Rhett Bauer is going to join us, one of my favorite guests to have on in a wide-ranging discussion, previewing all of Pacers free agency. Let's just get right to it. Can you believe it? It's an early release episode because it's free agency time. The day is kind of here, 6 p.m. Eastern time on the 30th. Players and teams can officially negotiate things. If you're not watching on YouTube, I just made ginormous air quotes, but it's officially the day. We'll find out what the Pacers offseason looks like. Rhett Bauer is here to talk about it. His mandatory 2 months away from the show has expired, and he's back. Rhett, it's a pretty big day for the Pacers.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that 2 months just drug by. I was listening, wishing I could be on. No, it's a great day. Slop everywhere, and I'm excited to get into it.
Who had started the term slop? I think it's so funny.
I don't know. I don't know.
Because now the newsbreakers are leaning into
They're using it, yeah.
So Rhett, I'm going to talk a lot for a second, and you're not going to say anything. Sorry. But that's just how I have to start this, because I think it's important to set the scene of what's about to actually happen for the Pacers, because I'm seeing a lot of people who don't quite understand their situation, and I've tried to hammer it a lot, but their roster crunch is the story of what's about to happen for them, right? Because the new CBA, it doesn't require it. I've seen the term require a lot. That's not true. It very, very, very strongly encourages teams to hit the salary floor in the summer. I've said that a lot on this show, and I will say it again. That is $13.6 million away from the salary cap. The Pacers are currently somewhere between $30 and $32 million away from the salary cap, which means they are extremely strongly encouraged by the NBA, with the threat of taking away some of their revenue sharing money, to spend at least $18 million in free agency. At the same time, they have 14 of their 15 roster spots, as it stands, currently filled, which means a couple things. Either, if they only sign one player, it's going to be someone good, who's good enough to make $18 million and actually help the Pacers, who have said they want to make the playoffs next year. Tyrese Haliburton tweeted it like 2 weeks ago. Like, it's clearly a stated goal for the team. Or if they sign somebody for less than that, then their offseason is just not complete. I keep seeing people say if they sign, the guy that's name popped up, I'll just use it because it's very recent, is Max Strus, on a deal that would be for less than $18 million a year. If they sign Max Strus, that's not the only thing they're going to do. It's not grading that move on just that move. It's the stuff they do after. It's, do they do a renegotiation to hit the floor? Do they make other trades to make other moves? Because they will have to, basically, because of the floor, make other moves. So because they're at 14 out of 15 guys, but they're still far from the floor, they're going to have a lot of activity, or they're going to sign somebody really good. And I think that is where the story of the summer starts for the Pacers, is which one of those paths is it? And it could be both. And how do they kind of manage those things at the same time? Okay, Rhett, that is my 2-minute spiel on why I think people are overreacting a little to the start of this, because there's so many pressure points being pushed at the Pacers that means even a big move right away to start free agency. And by the way, if they extend Haliburton at 601 on the 30th, great, they get at least a B for their entire summer. But in terms of signing external players, there's just so much more at play than just who did they sign, what position are they, and what's their value. It's how do they react to that? How do they actually use all of their resources? And you can't judge anything on the first day, even though it's going to be tempting to do so.
Yeah, there are certain front offices that you don't usually give the benefit of the doubt to. Like if they do something that doesn't make sense, you're kind of like, that doesn't make sense. And then it continues to not make sense. Like that's just sort of what happens. But there's some like Kevin Pritchard and the Pacers where if it doesn't make sense at first, things are probably not done. Like there's not just the one thing that happens and then that's their entire offseason. Unless that's extending Tyrese Halliburton, then that can be their entire offseason. But if they are going to bring in exactly, if they are going to bring in Max Strus, and we just saw them draft Ben Shepherd,
right?
A, then B, then C, right? Like if it doesn't make sense to the general public, there's probably something else going on. We just don't have that information yet. And so preemptively getting annoyed because they sign another 6'5" shooter, like I haven't been annoyed about it because again, it doesn't make sense. If that's the only thing they do and they keep everybody on the roster and then they also don't hit the salary floor with that transaction yet, that'll be extremely confusing, but I just don't think that's going to end up being the case. And so I think, especially when it could just be a smokescreen from Max Strus's people trying to get more money from somebody, like it hasn't happened yet. So we could probably just ease up just a tiny, tiny bit, at least for 24 hours till we figure out what happens tomorrow.
I don't even mean to pick on Strus or any of the reactions to Max Strus. It's just he was very recent, concrete numbers listed player. So he's just an easy example of how to set the scene. And the other way to just say what you just said, like even I did this after the draft, they pick up Shepherd, Wong, and King, and everyone's like, more small guards, what? And then immediately it's like, hey, Mojave King's not gonna be on the team. Like, you don't have to instant react and criticize. There is a time for criticism, and maybe on July 4th that is that time. But because of all these things pressuring the Pacers at the same time of not having, I keep saying that it's not technically right, being very, 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 very strongly encouraged to spend while also not having a lot of roster spots to do so means things could be interesting. And if they do sign Strus to that reported deal, I would expect them to be extremely active on the trade front with a lot of those young guards, perhaps some of their young bigs, to try to balance out their team financially. And the good thing for them is, and this is part two of setting the scene for their summer, is the new CBA is very punitive for teams that have expensive rosters. And so there's going to be, not even just in this free agency period, probably next February too. We saw some of this at the draft with like the most random swaps from pick like 21 through 48 or something, 40, 50, whatever. A lot of random trades because these teams have to balance their finances. And that's going to be a story for the league for like a year. And so if you're the Pacers who happen to have space and have stressed optionality for forever, you can be a team that benefits from that with your trades. And so I don't think their summer's just going to be about signings. I think it's going to be about more than that in terms of using their assets well and their cap space well to correctly straighten things out. They used their cap space up to the final dollar basically last year between the Turner renegotiation and their trade deadline ability to bring in guys to get more assets. Like they've been smart about that stuff. And so we're almost 8 minutes into a free agency discussion. Haven't talked about a single free agent yet, but I just think their summer, because of all these things, is about more than just who they sign and more about all these options they could have and are kind of forced to have because of the situation that they're in.
Yeah, exactly. And not even getting into that, but you also have to look at like, okay, what's the future of this team? Like, what do we know about the future of this team? It is Halliburton, it is Mathurin, it is Nembhard, and it's Jarris Walker. And that's kind of it. Like right now it's Miles Turner, but he's not under contract for much longer. And so we can't say definitively that he is a part of the core. So why are we getting upset about a guy that could come in and replace Buddy Hield when Buddy Hield's an expiring contract? Like he's not redundant with Buddy Hield beyond this season because Buddy Hield isn't on the Pacers next year. Like there's so many other things going on at play here. And especially with the CBA just coming out, like, I don't know. Did you sleep at all the last couple days? Like, have you just been reading?
I didn't read as much as I actually wanted to yesterday. I have a lot.
Yeah, no,
anyway, I read a lot of it.
Yeah, no. And so yeah. It's crazy in depth. There's tons going on. There's tons that people still don't really understand, and I'm sure teams are operating under the same idea, even though they probably spent the last 48 hours, 24 hours, whatever it is, digging into that exclusively. So just wait. It'll be fine. Like I as much as we've heard Kevin Pritchard and Tyrese Halliburton even talk about, Rick Carlisle too, talk about where this team is going, how they're going to get there. There's a lot going on, and it seems like they have a pretty good idea of what they want to be doing. And I think we just need to give them the time to flesh that out as much as possible.
Last year, the Ayton stuff happened like July, 12th or something? Like it
was late,
far into their summer for that to all get sorted. So the instant reaction part is not necessary. However, there's still some stuff they should do. And there's a specific type of player they should certainly prioritize that we need to talk about. Hey guys, quick little break here so I can talk to you about PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's simple. Do you think Shohei Ohtani is going to have more or less than 1.5 hits? For example, that's the whole gist. You pick 2 to 6 players, and if they'll score more or less than the PrizePicks projection on a number of stats, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. It's not you versus other people. It's you versus PrizePicks projections. They offer those projections on any sport that you watch. NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, whatever it is, you name it, they got it. And you can make your picks in 60 seconds or less. It's easy. It's safe. There's fast withdrawals, and it's operational in over 30 states as well as Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com, sign up, and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON to sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 at PrizePicks. Daily fantasy made easy. Rhett, this is very obvious to me in terms of their pursuit of free agents. I brought this up yesterday on the Rumor Show, but among the good players available this year, I'm not breaking any news here, but I still want to talk about it one more time before free agency. Among the good players available, even the not as great players available, if you can play the 3 and the 4, that is immensely valuable to the Pacers, right? If you can just play the 3, that's fine. They need wings. That's great. You can never have too many wings. If you can just play the 4, that's also fine. But because they just drafted a 4 that they presume should be on their team for a long time and be a good player because they drafted him, if you can play the 3 and play next to Jarris Walker and play the 4 when he isn't in the game, not only is that going to really elevate the Pacers if you're good, but it's going to allow them to have the perfect sort of lineup balance and flexibility to me. So, yeah, this isn't like breaking news or anything, but just given the Pacers situation, 3-4 types are going to be immensely valuable to them in this free agency period, which is why you're going to hear a lot of those names that have already come up of Harrison Barnes, Kyle Kuzma, DeAndre Hunter. I guess Grant Williams is exclusively 4. But in general, those names, PJ Washington can kind of play 3. I don't know. We'll talk about him later for other reasons. Cam Johnson, right? These kind of names, Georges Niang, they're all going to be of a potentially extreme value to the Pacers because they have more value to the Pacers potentially than other teams given the Pacers roster situation.
Yeah, it's the exact kind of player that everybody knows that we need, and that includes the Pacers front office. Like, it isn't going to be a surprise that they need these kinds of players, and that's probably partially why they keep popping up in the Pacers conversation circles of, like, on the transactions side of things, on the newsbreaker side of things, as like rumblings about what could happen, because that is what makes sense. And I think your point about playing the 3 and the 4 is where it really starts to cut down on the guys that I think should be considered, because if you can do one, we have a bunch of guys who can do one, but not the other. Like we have 4s. Well, not really, but we have 5s that can play the 4 decently. We have Jarris Walker, who I think is exclusively a 4. And then we have a bunch of 2s and 3s that can slide up and sometimes play the 4 if you're desperate for it. And so, they could sign easily 2 3/4s and be able to find a role for them in different degrees. So I think that is absolutely, I'm fascinated to see who it's going to end up being, because it has to be somebody, right? Like it's got to be somebody. So I'm fascinated to see what that skill set is going to be and what sort of information we get from this season of watching that skill set next to the rest of the Pacers core, and then see what we might need to address moving forward as well.
Yeah, part of getting a 3-4 beyond the current Pacers roster fit and all that sort of stuff is what you just said of like, you look, Aaron Nesmith, I think, is a 3, and much to the chagrin of many YouTube commenters, Chris Duarte can play the 3. To me, many people disagree with that. Either way,
I agree.
That's not like what they would need to evaluate what they need from a 3 with Halliburton and Mathurin, or Mathurin could be a 3 in this case. Remember, he talked about that earlier in the summer, potentially him starting at the 3. Another point for Strus potentially. But either way, they haven't really seen what that could be or what is important at those spots. Obviously, defense is important on the wing. Like every team knows that in the NBA. But in terms of cutting and shooting and screening and all these other things, like seeing exactly what makes sense next to a high-paced guy like Halliburton and Mathurin scoring and how all that gels is something they don't really know yet. And so not only is it really important for them to pursue the right guys, but if you can play the 3 and the 4, even if you're maybe not a top-flight free agent, you're going to have a ton of value to the Pacers because they're going to learn a lot from you. You're going to be able to use you in a lot of ways. You're not going to hinder the development of their top 8 pick that they just had. Like, I feel like I'm talking in circles a little bit. It's just, I think that to me, you'd sacrifice a little bit of talent necessarily to get a good 3-4 as opposed to a better player maybe who can't play both of those positions. I would think that at least.
No, absolutely. Like there's, and I got into this yesterday a little bit. There's so much information about this Pacers team that we don't have. Like what the future contending, hopefully, version of this Pacers team. There's so much information we don't have. Like we don't know what it looks like to have a rangy, long athlete at the 3 who can navigate screens really well. We don't know what it looks like. We think we know with Jarris, but like we don't know what it looks like to have kind of a bruiser power forward that can kind of stretch the floor, kind of do some connective passing. Like we don't know any of that. And so being able to get guys in for relatively cheap, like you said, or maybe if they're really expensive because you think that they are just going to fit, whether that be money cost or asset cost, like you're still going to be gathering that information. And even if that person is not the exact right answer, they are going to either check boxes or present boxes that need to be checked for that right answer moving forward. And I think that is where this season is so crucially important because Halliburton's likely going to get a lot more expensive next year. And this is your last
chance. Cut a word out of that sentence.
Well,
even if it doesn't get extended, they're going to pay him next summer. Like,
but true. He will be a lot more expensive next year by about $30 million. And so, this is your last year of him on a massive, massive discount. So you need to use that wisely. You need to use the flexibility, and you need to get as many unique player types that you don't already have on the roster in the door, so that way you know what you need to do next. And I am very excited to see what that is.
I'm with you. That's why, even though Harrison Barnes isn't like this, like, you're fist pumping at the ceiling raise he gives your team, would have value to the Pacers. Certainly. Kyle Kuzma, same kind of way. Like all these guys, you don't love their fit or talent, would be hugely important for the Pacers to learn a lot about their team and to be better next year, which is something that they certainly want. Now, I do think 2 threes, as long as you can play the 3, certainly have the Aaron Nesmith test of, are you better than Aaron Nesmith? Will you play above Aaron Nesmith's going to be important for them? Because if not, they should just play Aaron Nesmith or Jordan Nwora or Duarte or whoever. But getting someone in there who can play multiple positions, I think, with the 3 being one of them, is particularly important for my next 2 points on my list to talk about looking at this Pacers free agency period. One we kind of already covered and one we haven't touched on at all. But I think there are other little backdrops that matter here. One of them was just trades being such a tool for this team. We did talk about this in the first segment, but you're already seeing like the fact that they're able to potentially get DeAndre Hunter isn't because he isn't good. It's because the Hawks are about to have to pay a bunch of other players, and the CBA is not going to let them keep all these guys at the same time. Tobias Harris is only potentially available, not because he isn't good, but because the Sixers can't pay a bajillion players at the same time, and Harden's future's kind of, we'll see. But if he's expensive, all of a sudden it's like, well, damn, they can't afford all these guys. Like a lot of like Kuminga, I didn't talk about yesterday, but like the Warriors are ridiculously expensive, and like a young guy who isn't quite meeting his contract value right this second, even though he could be good in the future. Not exactly what the word. Like I could go on and on, but that opens up a lot for the Pacers, even beyond the guys who are actually not under contract as free agents. Like they could be in position to do more than just that. And so I think their offseason is not just limited to the external players. I think that's something for fans to know and be conscious of this offseason. The other thing is renegotiations and how it plays into this. I don't think the Pacers will renegotiate anybody this summer, to be clear, like they did with Turner in January. It's kind of rare, but the cap jumped up, and with the new extension rules allowing veteran extensions to be a little more favorable and possible, I think free agency is just going to be less common as a thing that actually happens in the NBA. And so renegotiating when you can, I think something teams are going to look to do. Like you're already hearing a lot about the Kings potentially doing so with former Pacers center Domantas Sabonis. And so if the Pacers don't meet the floor with 1 or 2 signings, Buddy Hield is eligible for renegotiation and extension. He would be renegotiation eligible even during the season, theoretically. And then before the season starts, Daniel Tice and TJ McConnell are both renegotiation eligible. I don't think either of them deserve more money on their deal. But either way, that is a possible way for them also to be bumped up to the floor if they're like really close, right? So there's other methods involved between trades and those for the Pacers to do little things that could sort of change the outlook of their summer or deflect the amount of space that they have, all sorts of little things that matter. And so be on the lookout for more than just what signings can do for the Pacers, because I hate to use their word again, but optionality has put this forward. So it isn't just let's sign a player or two with the roster spots we have. It's a lot more than that.
Right, especially because the roster spots they have are not very plentiful. Like at the present moment, if they decide to do something like sign Max Strus for the deal that's been reported 3 for $48, that starts at about $15 million. That does not get them to the salary floor, and they also don't have a ton of roster spots after that. So you have to do something else. I think we already talked about it. Could potentially be a trade in that circumstance. It could be. There's just. That's the funny thing about the optionality that they seem so psyched about, is that we could talk about all sorts of different outcomes for all this, and we could be right or wrong about literally any aspect of them, and probably still wouldn't even consider some of the things that could happen. And so it's going to be busy. It's going to be busy.
It is busy, going to be busy, and potentially confusing. And I think those backdrops of other stuff mean, like, even if they sign a player 2 seconds in, like at 6:05 p.m., if we get the Pacers have signed XYZ player, like I think we got the Doug McDermott one like 10 minutes in to free agency in 2018. There still could be more to come, right? I would not be limited to just saying they're done, their roster's full. I still think they could be looking to do stuff elsewhere, especially because a consolidation trade is something that has made a lot of sense for them for a while and could be a way for them to kind of balance things out, still add to their salary number, and potentially sign another player if they consolidate. Let's talk about sneaky players, Rhett. Everybody's favorite thing, just naming names, just naming free agent names for the summer. I did the big names on the Rumors show yesterday, and there's a reason that those names are the bigger names. The Pacers have cap space and obvious needs. They're going to be connected to players that make sense, and they should be pursuing those players. I want to talk about some under-the-radar guys. One more break here, guys, to talk to you about the Gametime app, because buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you, because they've got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, so you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. They have flash deals on last-minute tickets for every event you could want to go to. It's easy to find and buy them for every type of event in your area. They have images of the seat views right in the app, and their lowest price guarantee, their event cancellation protection, and their job loss protection makes it perfect for anyone looking to buy tickets. I used it to buy tickets to the New York Liberty game when I was in New York a couple weeks ago. It was perfect, fast, and easy. So forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event, and their Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, guess what? Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So, Rhett, have I told you that I have a favorite free agent for the Pacers this summer?
I think you may have, but I don't. No, I'm going to say no. I don't want to just be guessing, because I've got mine list.
I actually have two. I have one that is only attainable if another thing happens, and I have one that I think could be attainable even though he might not be. To me, the dream, this is like the Pacers summer when as good as possible target for the Pacers is Jeremy Grant. And I think that's been talked about by quite a few people. Just that level of offensive talent, cutting, shooting, defense, size is like exactly what I would think that they would want in a 3-4 type. And that's important. He can play the 3 on the floor. He played the 3 a little in Detroit. He played the 4 for Portland. He played a little bit of both in Denver. Like, he is such a good fit for them. However, it's attainable unless by the time this episode comes out and free agency actually starting, Damian Lillard finally does something, or the Blazers finally do something. I don't care about the Blazers for the sake of what we're talking about right now, but that's the only way that's even possible to me, because Portland is incentivized to overpay him, not pay him fairly, to overpay him specifically to keep him if they want to keep Damian Lillard. So the Pacers should not be overpaying anybody at this juncture. So as great of a fit as he would be, it requires a lot of specific stuff happening for him to fit. My actual favorite potentially gettable guy, and he's only potentially gettable if the Hornets are the Hornets once again, is PJ Washington. PJ Washington, to me, at his age and ability level and skills on both ends, and has the size to play 3 positions to me. He's definitely a natural 4, small enough and mobile enough to play the 3 in certain matchups, can play the 5 and did so for the Hornets last season. He's very good and young. A lot of guys do well when they get out of the Hornets system. I don't think he's going to leave Charlotte, because have made it. I think their situation means they're going to operate as an over-the-cap team, keep his hold in the mix. He'll be a restricted free agent. It's going to be hard to sign him to a deal that the Hornets don't match. But they have Brandon Miller. Miles Bridges could be coming back for them. They've got Kelly Oubre. Perhaps they don't want to pay a guy a lot to be. They have Gordon Hayward. I might be good. Kelly Oubre. He's a free agent. Like perhaps they don't want to invest a lot in a guy who'd be like their third or fourth priority forward. That is just a guess. But if it's even possible that he's available, I haven't talked about him much on this show. I think he is an excellent fit for the Pacers and would be one of my top targets if I was the team.
Absolutely agree. And I thought that was the guy you had in mind, but I was thinking a little bit lower than that as a guy who's just like not restricted. But no, I think he's a guy that has been on Pacers fans' radars forever just because of the Miles Turner trade discussion rumor mill that happened. And he was one of the prime candidates to come back on that for the Pacers. But he's a guy that is, like you said, he's versatile enough on both ends of the floor where even though he isn't a three, I think he shoots it well enough and can pass and dribble well enough that you can kind of get by with that as long as you're going up against like say a Toronto, for instance, where they're playing Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam, and OG Anunoby at the same time. None of those are really threes. They're big. And so in that case, it would be really nice to have PJ Washington to throw out there as the three, quote unquote, next to a guy like Jarris Walker and Miles Turner, to where you actually have the size to combat that, even though the positional designation might not be as clean as what you would want. And it's everybody. I'm fascinated with everybody's situation right now. But the fact that they took Miller and they do have a couple other forwards on the roster, and one of which they did extend a qualifying offer to make a restricted free agent, it could be very likely that he's just not a priority for them. They have a lot going on over there. And so I don't think he would be that expensive either. I think that's why he's one of my favorite targets, is because I think some of the reports that I've seen, like he could probably not going to get $20 million a year, will he? Maybe he should. Maybe he's good enough to do that because he's a quality starter, but I don't think he will. And so at that point, he's a 3/4/5 that is cost controlled for a while, that can play a bunch of different positions on both ends of the floor. And that is a premium asset if you can pull it away from the team.
Okay, I think he's a quality starter, and I also am of the opinion that every quality starter in the league is going to be making at least $20 million pretty soon. Does the league think he's a quality starter? I don't know. I don't think that
it doesn't seem that way.
Yeah, it doesn't. I agree. So if he would be a less than 20 mil per year guy, I think he is a dreamy fit with this Pacers team and would be one of my first calls if it was possible. These are names that are lesser discussed. Rhett, you can go. Give me a few that you like for the Pacers this summer beyond the big obvious names that if the Pacers pursued that guy, I guess it makes sense.
This is not a surprise to anybody who has followed me on Twitter or even heard me speak ever, but Jalen McDaniels. I love the McDaniels brothers, and I think that Jalen is a guy who has a body type and size, length, athleticism that the Pacers don't have on their roster. So when I was talking earlier about gathering information, it'd be really neat to be able to look at a guy like that playing next to Halliburton in transition and on defense, navigating screens and stuff, and be like, wow, yeah, that's what we need for sure. And I think him coming off of, I think he made like $1.5 million last year, if that. So he's not going to be like overly expensive. And he's a guy that should be relatively low cost. He's 25 years old. You can see what his brother can do. He's not as good as Jaden, but the cost is low. The versatility is high. And I would be very excited to see that kind of athlete next to this Pacers team as somebody who can play the 3 or the 4.
Yeah, I think he'd be a really good fit as well, and pretty cheap, right? Like he is also not perceived as some super expensive kind of guy. Like look at the trade that the Sixers got him for in the middle of the season, like just seconds basically to get him from a Charlotte team that stunk. Like I don't think he'd be ridiculously expensive. Would be a good talent grab for this Pacers team. He was on your list when you were ranking your favorite options for them at the forward spots. And I quibbled with you about that, but I do think he's good and a good under the radar addition. Is Cam Johnson too mainstream to throw in this section? Like I would say so. I mean,
He's too mainstream, but he's also perfect.
Go ahead. You're sorry.
No, he's mainstream, but he's mainstream for a reason.
Perfect fit.
Like, yeah.
So I'll throw him out because he's been discussed, like Alex Golden. I talked about him on the small forwards episode, but 3'4", 27, good on both ends, tall. Oh, he is a wonderful fit. Less mainstream and now available for some reason. I'm doing a brow thing if you're not watching on YouTube. Where did this Taurean Prince crap come from? Don't know what the Timberwolves are thinking with this one. I saw John Krasinski reported they could try to bring him back, which is smart to me. He's good. It would not be expensive, and I don't know if the Pacers would. He could probably play the 3. I don't think you'd love it as any team, but you can get Taurean Prince for like the amount the Timberwolves even just cut him for. I'd probably do that as the Pacers. I'm surprised that the Timberwolves are not guaranteeing that deal. That's a newer one to the mix because of that situation, but he's one that I think is a sneaky one. And I'll want to get to my. Actually, you got to my last one of Jalen McDaniels. I'll throw in another one that I said his name earlier. How about Georges Niang? Pacers draft pick, can really shoot it, can probably play the 3 and the 4, won't be too expensive. And if you'd like to drum roll, is really good friends with Tyrese Halliburton. Of course, that makes you a good fit with the Pacers. I don't know if he's like the slam dunk of all hires, or of all signings, but you got to look out for this Pacers team.
Yeah, and that's a different kind of player. Once again, like that's a big shooter who, if there is another move to be had with some players on the Pacers roster that are good friends with Tyrese Halliburton, it wouldn't be the worst thing to spend $5 or $5 million to bring in his reportedly best friend. $5 would be even better, but $5 million is also acceptable for a guy like Georges Niang.
$5. That'd be like 1/100,000th of a two-way deal. I don't think Niang would be taking.
That's a little insulting.
Yeah, I don't even know what would they would. Are you splitting time between like the Pacers, the Mad Ants, and like a middle school team at that point? Like, what does that contract even actually look like?
Maybe he's playing for the Pacers 2K team as well.
Yeah. I don't know anything about 2K gaming or their salaries or anything, how that works. I had one more name, and it was Jalen McDaniels, who you already said. The only things I think I haven't said that I've seen kind of talked about in the sphere, I have never talked about Kuminga on this show. I floated my fake Kuminga trade to you. It's really tricky with the draft over to find something that makes sense as value to get him, helps the Warriors save money, and doesn't like lopside the Pacers roster. He's a good player and a good fit for the Pacers, but it's a tricky trade. And the one I've seen a lot on social media that I haven't heard much about in the real world is Gordon Hayward. The argument is similar to that of Tobias Harris in that he's good and he's in the last year of his deal now. So the opportunity cost of bringing in his contract isn't crazy. His injury history is crazy. So you're not probably going to be giving up much of anything for him. And the Hornets aren't super incentivized to cut money. Like they're not really flirting with the tax, even though they're over the cap. But I suppose if you could get Gordon Hayward for very little, I would do that. He's good and would help the Pacers, and they've pursued him before. I'm just kind of rambling on names at this point, but those aren't free agents. Those are trade guys that I haven't talked about like at all. Yeah, if they got either of them, I would get it, especially at the right prices. I think the Kuminga trade's hard to come up with. I think the Hayward trade's a lot easier to come up with, but I'm not sure what it would look like for the Pacers. I don't have any other free agents or trade guys to talk about, unless you feel like I missed somebody very obvious today.
I don't know about very obvious. There's guys like Darius Baisley, Derek Jones Jr. Just like real.
Darius Baisley.
I'm a huge fan.
NBA teams love him anymore.
I would say probably not. He's also a restricted free agent for the Suns, and so the Suns they didn't play him very much, but they also need like bodies. So I don't know how that would work exactly.
They'd have his full bird rights, which I think would matter a lot to them.
Yes, exactly. No, I really like the Gordon Hayward idea. Just moving forward, I feel like he would be somebody who would be very interested in staying in Indiana post after his contract expires. But I don't know how much that conversation has to do with it. What about Cam Reddish?
Can we stop? Dude,
I can't.
I'm sorry. I can't like be that rude about NBA players. Like they're in the NBA, they're talented, but just like I just don't get it. He's He was good for Portland for a little bit, so I suppose he's earned a little bit.
He
of
was
grace.
good
I've
for the
never,
Portland Rip City G League team that just got announced. Like that, he was
yeah,
not
like
good for the Trailblazers.
how long were people like, oh my gosh, the Pacers should trade for Anthony Bennett? Like, did that last more than a year? Like, why? When does the draft position stop mattering? At what point are they just not very good? You know, yeah, no, I have nothing to say about Kelly.
Okay, Kelly Oubre. How about Kelly Oubre? Another Hornets wing forward
Yeah,
guy.
he's unrestricted too. I think he's probably like a lot of teams like fifth favorite idea. I think he's good. And
for sure.
He hit the thing about his stats is they're super misleading from last year because he will never have that big of a role again ever in his career. There's no way. He's fine. Like he is like textbook fine at everything. But to me, if you get Kelly Oubre, that signals that you had bigger plans and you did not get to execute those bigger plans.
Yeah. Looking at Oubre's stats with like the Warriors and with a healthy Hornets team is a much better approximation of what he is as a player. And it also kind of tells me something that the Warriors just like did not want him after they had him. It's like, that's not usually a great sign with
the Wizards who picked him in the lottery or one pick after the lottery.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. He's an interesting guy
for a second too. Yeah.
He was. Yes.
Okay. Can I throw two more trade names at you? React
for sure.
Appropriately. One. This is also a you strike out on lots of other stuff name. Marcus Morris.
Ooh. Yikes.
I think he would be pretty much free.
Right. Yeah. I don't love him as I don't want to say person because that sounds like I know him. I don't know him, but like just like the way he plays and kind of like the attitude he seems to have, I'm not sure that would be great, but he is a player that the Pacers do not have as a 3-4. So if he's free, and I believe he's expiring, right? He's an expiring contract. Okay, so would not be the worst thing, but would definitely be far down my list of options.
That'd be an after Oubre option to me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The other name, these are just two. Like a lot of the talk about Harrison Hunter is, look, this team has financial troubles. So I'm just looking at the teams that are in that situation. Morris would be one of those names. The other one is Duncan Robinson. The difference is Duncan Robinson is good. He has utility. Calling him good is like a little bit of too much for me, but his utility, that dude can shoot it and he's expensive. So I don't think it would take like hardly anything to get him, but he has more than just this year on his deal left. So there is actual opportunity cost with him. And that would make me not give up any value for him. I would prefer to sign a player if I'm the Pacers than to trade for Duncan Robinson. But again, if we're talking about lesser discussed things that could potentially happen if summer is a disaster, I mean, I suppose you could do worse. You can shoot it like crazy.
Yeah, no, the $19.4 million for next year, not this upcoming year, but the next year is not great. And then he has an ETO, an early termination option for the year after that as well. So that's a pretty expensive guy to take, even if it is for free, quote unquote. Like you said, the opportunity cost there is pretty big. And so I would have to imagine that comes with a couple other moves, I would imagine. But he is useful. He is useful.
He is. I will throw one last two. Okay. I'll throw two more names in the ring, and then I'll be done with names. Because at this point, we're just throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks.
Yep.
One is an Indy native who won Mr. Basketball here and had a good season with the Kings. And if the Kings want to use cap space, they might not be able to keep this guy. Trey Lyles. Definitely would be I would not play him over Jarris Walker, but if you don't have a great summer, Trey Lyles, you could do worse than to me. And the other one is Yuta Watanabe, who is probably just going to get the minimum fully guaranteed from a contender because he could be in the rotation, but also a good player with a lot of size who can play multiple positions.
Yeah, I thought you were going Eric Gordon there for a second, and I was going to not react favorably to that. I don't mind Trey Lyles. He's definitely a 4 and probably
exclusively a 4.
He's probably closer to a 5 than he is a 3 if you're going to try to find a second position for him. So that would definitely have to be one of those, July 15th moves where it's like, okay, we got most of our rotation figured out and we need a versatile power forward that can just do a bunch of stuff and doesn't mind playing 17 minutes a game behind our rookie. So that is, I don't mind either of those. Yuta Watanabe is a guy that I considered, but I just don't see him anywhere but a contender. Like,
agreed.
I don't think he's so valuable to another team that they would offer him enough money for him to not go to like the Suns or the Bucks, I suppose. Like it's any team like that. I don't see that too much. What about a guy like Josh Richardson or Matisse Thybulle? Two
Yep,
very
2
different
threes.
players. Yep.
Yeah. I talked about Richardson on the shooting guard episode because he can play 3.
Yep.
To me, I like Thybulle a lot because of the defense. I still vividly remember the game where the Sixers had like a 20-point fourth quarter comeback in Indy because he blew up every freaking play for the whole game in his own defense. So, yeah, I mean, defensive forward, yeah, of course, it'd be great.
Yeah.
Rhett, I think we've officially named enough players that's pretty likely the Pacers end up with one of them. We can go, we did it. We called it.
Just cut that episode down. I think they should get Yuta Watanabe.
See, yeah, exactly. As we were saying, I would never do that. I would never do that level of patting myself on the back. But anyway, I think we've set the scene for what to expect in the next couple days for the Pacers. Their top end guys are obvious. Their lower level backup plans are a little wider ranging, but still kind of obvious. But I think the reason they have an advantage over a lot of other spending teams is their cap situation lets them do trade stuff, and the roster situation encourages some of that trade stuff. We'll see how it all goes. And we'll break it all down here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Rhett, thank you for the time. We'll see you in 2 months. Where can people follow you and your work talking about basketball, the NBA, the Pacers, etc.?
You can find me on Twitter before 2 months from now. I will be on Twitter pretty frequently over the next couple of days for sure. At Rhett_Bauer. I got a lot of stuff going on there that's not all Pacers related, but I will try to have something over on iPacersblog for the Pacers free agency preview about some guys that I did some statistical filters for over the last 3 years, trying to narrow down like, hey, if you want passing, shooting, and block shots, this is the guy you should look at. And that's not just for free agents, that's also for trades, but it is a very fascinating list in my opinion. So I'm hopeful to get that out before it becomes irrelevant. And I just did all of this research and work for nothing.
That's the goal. Rhett had to come on after Derek from my Pacers blog because of the 2-month limit I set for no reason at all for guests. I just have this stupid, I don't know. I like spreading out the voices. Either way, this was great. I think the scene has been set for free agency. This episode, if you're listening as early as possible, I put up early so we can have 24 hours before the official start of free agency to breathe. But I've done this in the past. I'll probably do it again tomorrow. Just click record at 6 on the 30th, see what happens, react as stuff comes in to see how it goes. If nothing happens, I'll do obviously an episode recapping the first day of free agency, what it means to the Pacers for Saturday. This will probably be a 7 days a week for Locked On Pacers because of free agency. So stay on the lookout for lots of stuff covering free agency. Thank you all a ton for listening. See you soon.